Hi, Jennifer Villarreal here.
What? Wait, that completely threw
I'm
me
doing
off.
a little bit of a shout out to somebody, so go ahead and say your name in Spanish.
Okay, I can't. I'm tongue-tied, remember?
That's all right. Just try.
Hi, everyone, and this is Rocio Vallejo.
Wow.
Oh.
This is a Sales from the Heart show, the place where business meets heart and soul. And today, we're going to actually mix it up a little bit and not really do anything. We're just going to just kind of be, because we've hit a plateau.
Oh.
Yeah, that's kind of boring.
So we'll just sit here?
Yeah, we'll just sit here and be complacent. Is that what you do when you hit that plateau? That's the topic of the show today. What happens when we feel defeated, when we hit that plateau, and sometimes we just want to give up. But there's all these other things that go through our mind as well. Can you relate, Rocio?
I most definitely can, yes.
All right, so we're going to keep it real. We might get a little vulnerable here. Maybe you'll share with our audience today some of those things that have you faced, some of the defeated moments. And of course, I'm an open book and I share mine as well. And so what are some of the things that people say to themselves when they hit that plateau?
What's next? Where am I going? Or I don't know where I'm going. I just know that I don't want to be here. Mm-hmm. I've tried everything. I don't know. I think there are so many, along with, feeling those typical emotions that a lot of us are already familiar with, but frustrated and angry, even a little, what is it?
Desperate, maybe?
Desperate. Yeah, definitely desperate. And then sad is coming to mind, but that's not the word that I want to keep thinking pathetic. I know that's
Pathetic.
really bad. Yes.
Well, you might feel that way,
You
right?
might definitely feel that way. Yes.
Yeah, feeling a little just deflated and, what am I going to do? I've tried this, I've tried that, or maybe I just don't know what it is that I want to do.
Right.
And I think this can hit some people around this time of year when there's those go-getters and, hey, have you done your 2015 goals yet? And, hey, we got to do our vision board or whatever it is that they're feeling all this pressure and they don't maybe something came up where you were planning on moving forward with something and then all of a sudden there were these bumps in the road or maybe it completely threw you off track.
Or right. Or, somebody let you down or that client that was supposed to sign, your contract decided, to go a different route or that job that you were counting on that you could have swore was, a guaranteed in, fell through and they decided to go and hire somebody else.
Or there's drama coming in, whether it's from family, from previous business partners or encounters or
Right.
whatever it may be, people are trying to come at you and throw you off course, or maybe you just don't even know what your course is and you've hit that plateau or you've dumped down, you hit a little bit of a slump. So I think we should explore this a little bit more, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So what are some of the things that, I think we can come up with some excuses as well. We just need to call it out, right? We might say, but I've tried that before. You need to keep the big butts aside. Right. I mean, we like big booties, but not those kind of butts, okay? That's what we're talking about here. We're talking about just the excuses that come up time and time again. But I've tried this, Jennifer, but I've done this before and it didn't work. You're not the same person today as when you try that maybe a year ago, maybe even a month ago or 10 years ago.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Definitely. I think for me, it's something that I've experienced a little more recently, but definitely feeling like I've hit somewhat of a slump. And it's frustrating. It's definitely frustrating. And it's kind of I hate asking myself or trying to figure out how to redirect myself,
Yeah, I think that can come into play, especially when you feel that you've done your part.
Right.
And maybe there's somebody else who you're somewhat relying on or codependent on, and sometimes by choice, sometimes not.
Right.
And then you say, well, geez, I put in 100% of my effort. But this is where I would have to probably say, did you? Right? Where there are times where maybe you got complacent, where you were counting on something to come through, so you stopped doing everything else.
Right.
That can be one aspect of it. And then maybe the other aspect is this person just isn't compatible with you, and it's actually a blessing in disguise where things don't work out. I know I recently had something like that where it was definitely a blessing that I didn't move forward in collaboration with these people. And, it might seem like trouble now, but can you imagine if things would have gotten involved even more in down the road? And so things do have a way of working out, but I think in between that time, in between that transition, what could provide some peace in your heart around that? Right?
Definitely.
So what do you think that could be?
For me?
Yeah. I know we talked about this a little bit yesterday.
Yes. So how I could find some kind of peace around my heart?
Yeah. Around the disappointment, around, feeling maybe stuck that things didn't work out, and then what's next?
Right. I think ultimately I know that everything will be fine. And I know that everything will work itself out.
But that's a lot easier said than done, right? I mean, do you have to release a little bit? Do you scream at the top of your lungs? Do you cry?
You do.
Do you release? Do you vent?
You do. I mean, definitely. I mean, I think you suggested yesterday that I hit a couple of pillows.
Yeah.
And that I scream. And I won't share whether or not I did any of those
I also
things.
said to grab your boobs really hard. And it was in the midst of some tears, right? And I made you chuckle a little bit. So what I did there is I just changed that state of mind.
Right.
Right? Because you were in this, okay, she wasn't crying like that.
I wasn't crying like that, but I was
But
crying.
she did tear up. And then, of course, it breaks my heart to, hear Rocio cry. But that's also, I can maintain that because I know it's just a temporary state. And then, we just try to shift up that mind. So maybe for you at home, maybe you want to grab your boobs, whatever. Or another body part, okay? But how about just doing some jumping jacks? Go in a different room, change your state of mind, and then that way we can provide some clarity for the next step.
Right. And then I think what's really difficult for me personally right now is trying to figure out the what's next. And what work and I'm very much a planner. So I think that's where I struggle.
Right, and because you were looking for that security. Okay,
yes.
Well, what's next? I need to work on something. I need to know that there's something coming through.
Yes, and I have to have some kind of a plan so that I at least know that I'm putting forth the effort. So, yeah.
But how else can we put forth effort, right? And ease are these thoughts that are circulating in our head, right? Because these thoughts are trying to prevent us from feeling a certain way. And so it could have been, writing down some things, and maybe you don't know the specifics of it, but you know the ambiance or the feeling around it, right? So, hey, I want to be creative, and I want to be leading, but yet working with other people and inspiring them. You might not know all the specific details just yet, but when you start with that, then all the other stuff will start to come through. And then when you start to notice that these doubts are coming into play, where you're like, oh, but I have to do this all over again, or, oh, I don't want to go back to this or that, then we can start to dissect that more and more and more.
Right.
Right?
I think I read yesterday somewhere, because of course there I go searching and trying to, find answers
out there.
But knowing your what and your why, right? And deciphering, what separates the two or what makes them different. So your what is, what exactly it is you're doing. Am I right?
Well, we always go back to that base foundation, and what is that motivation and that drive for you internally? And this goes back to the premise of understanding who you truly are and who you really work for.
Right.
Right? And when we have that deeper drive, regardless of what we're doing, we can bring that forward. A lot of times we look for that significance through this big prestigious title or, a job out there. And we don't realize how we can impact other people's lives by just being who we are through that smile, through that engagement. All of a sudden, the right people start to come into alignment. And once in a while, you do get those bumps in the road. You get those little psychos that are out there and but it's how do we maintain and walk through that when that happens? And when we realize that we can make it through that storm, right, then our confidence starts to shift and grow tremendously. And then we're able to serve even more people because there's other people out there that are experiencing something similar. Right. And then you can actually see it in their eyes. You can hear it in their voice, and you can connect with them on a whole nother level.
Right. And you can always adjust those as you go along, too, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah. But it still feels yucky, right? While you're going through it.
It's a horrible feeling not knowing just not knowing, you know, I think.
But what is it that you do know, Rocio?
I think what I mentioned a little earlier was I know that it's going to be fine. I think it's fully accepting that maybe that's not difficult. I almost feel like sometimes I'm trying to convince myself of that. You know, it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. It'll be fine. Everything's fine. And I've heard people say that, and I can tell, and I can see it in their eyes, and I can hear it in their voice. I'm like, you know, I may know that it's going to be fine, but do you really believe that? You know?
Right. Or are you trying to mask it behind the superficial, you know, positive thought, right? And we talked a little bit about this with the affirmations, et cetera, trying to convince ourselves of something. And, you know, if you don't feel like it's going to be great, or you do feel like you're in a little bit of slump, acknowledge that. Don't try to hide from it, but don't mask behind it either. You know, don't run and try to avoid feeling something by, you know, just going to the club, you know, every night. And so that way you don't think about it.
You're just completely avoiding
right.
the issue.
Watching television to distract your mind over and over again. I'm not saying to unplug a little bit, but just remember, are you hurting yourself in a different way then? So in talking about it, going to somebody for that support, not being so proud or thinking that they have to do it all on their own, or how is somebody going to help me? You know, I don't have the financial resources for this. You know, there's always a way or a resource. And maybe if that person couldn't help you, then another person would. But don't let that block you from reaching out to somebody. And as always, as we say here, you know, feel free to reach out. This is definitely a resource for you, whether it's through the show, whether it's one-on-one, in a group platform. You know, get in touch with us. And you can always email me at info@salesfromtheheart.com.
So for someone like me who almost desperately feels like they need answers right now, what can I do right now to make this better, or to make myself feel better? Because I think that's what it is. It's that crazy emotion when it takes over and we feel so, or like anxiety starts to kick in. How can we relieve a little bit of that?
Right. So we talked about changing our state of mind. We talked about reaching out to somebody for support, help, venting, whether that is, you know, not taking it out on a poor little puppy, but, you know, maybe punching a pillow, screaming at the top of your lungs, allowing yourself to release emotionally. We've been told so many times that no, men don't cry. You're not supposed to cry. Females not supposed to cry. You're being weak. You know, sometimes the body needs to release these things as well, because you can process it mentally, but then physically our body is going to hang on to it. And then I think also it's important to understand, where is this coming from? Is it because there's somebody else involved, which typically there is, or another circumstance or situation? And what are those boundaries that you're holding or not holding with those other people? Are you afraid to respond back to them? Are you afraid that they're going to take it the wrong way? You know, are you afraid of what the consequences could be because you state your opinion, or you don't want to be left in the dark by wondering what's going on. Right.
And also, I think I've experienced this. So a lot of, I'm just going to put it out there, Jennifer's sharing a lot of what's going on with me right now. And I think with what I've experienced is just that, you know, or recognizing that the other individual has blocks or has things that they need to work through. So how understanding, you know, am I? You know, how were those boundaries that you were talking about?
Or are you being too understanding?
Right, exactly.
Right? So are you not setting those parameters in those deadlines and you're leaving it open? Right. Are you clearly stating, hey, we need to connect by end of day today. Can you make that happen? Right? Not, well, when are you going to get back to me? Or I haven't heard from you. You know, we have to be a little bit more direct with, if you're not being as direct, and if you're being too aggressive, then maybe we need to scale that back. Everybody's different. This isn't cookie cutter. So it's really helpful if we hear exactly what your situation is, what your circumstance is, and then I can better direct you. So I know we're kind of talking in generalities here, but at some point this will hit you, or you know somebody else that it's affecting, and maybe we can provide that as a resource for you through this segment today. But feel free to message us and let us know, you know, any particular circumstances that you're facing.
Okay. Can we explore boundaries a little bit more?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
So what do you want to know about boundaries?
So I'm very much a giver, and I would consider myself to be very understanding. maybe overly understanding, or I wouldn't say I can be very patient. No, I'm not always very patient, but how do I, I think, we've discussed, during our coaching sessions about creating these types of boundaries and giving deadlines. And I think that's great, but I tend to add a lot of fluff and exclamation points and all of that kind of stuff in my text messages or my emails, and how
Yeah.
I know that that's something that I've known that. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to start working with you, is because you're really great at creating those boundaries. And that's something that I know that I need to work on and I want to learn how to do. So what are some tips that I can start, implementing now as of
Sure.
today?
I think sometimes you mentioned this with the text and with the emails. Pick up the phone, right? Because we're hiding behind that.
We're trying to avoid something.
Right, exactly. And sometimes with certain people, you don't want to have those conversations because you're dealing with somebody illogical. So this actually just happened with me recently, where I don't want to engage in conversation with somebody who's illogical, irrational, and just flat out. There's not going to be it's not going to be a win-win. So it's best in that situation to keep it brief and send that message and be done with it, right? Again, it depends on what circumstance. In this situation with creating those boundaries, if you pick up the phone, you reach out to connect with somebody and they still don't answer and you need a reply back, then you can send a text message, but maybe you need to have somebody else kind of look at it. Okay, and if you don't have somebody there to support you with that, I would encourage you to connect with somebody who could. And again, remember, be selective with who you choose to share that with, because they could actually come at it from their own perspective with their own fears. So they have to remain neutral. And then you can also send the text message to yourself first. So and look at it and read it a few minutes later when you're not in that emotional state of when you first send it, right? And then you'll start to see it from that other perspective.
Now, this is funny. I'm curious to know, just because we're on the topic and it's something that I've thought about a little bit, but are there certain times of day that you would think that you're maybe a little more emotional?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it just depends on what's going on in your day.
Okay.
I would try to keep it as neutral as possible. Remember, our emotions and our feelings, we control them. They don't control us. And so it can be very, very manipulative. And then again, when we come from that place of neutrality, when we come from that heart-centeredness, we don't have that duality and that tug and pull, right? And so we want to just get into that state as much as possible. And if we're finding that we're in these state of emotions and something, there could be that deeper wound that we need to address. It's going to keep resurfacing, whether it comes through in your family life, in your business, in your personal life, in your health. This could be a repetitive pattern that's going on. So, is there a passive aggressiveness there that you're dealing with, where maybe you see it more in other people, but yet there's still a part of you that's there.
Right.
Maybe it's something that, gets passed on from generation after generation, and it's time for those chains to be broken. But what we realize is that these chains that we're carrying, they're not wrapped around us.
Right.
Again, we're carrying them, and we need to release that, right? Otherwise, again, it's going to keep resurfacing over and over.
Right. Or you start to encounter, which is something that I've realized, where, this boundary thing, I've noticed that it's come up, not only in my career and with my business and with recent opportunities, but also my family, definitely my family. And I just feel like it's something that I have to learn to somewhat master, because it keeps coming up. And I feel like it's funny how, like, we go through when we're going through one thing, it'll present itself in different areas of our life in different forms.
Sure.
Until we figure it out.
Sure. And there might be a level of forgiveness there. There might be something where you're like, I don't want to be like my mom or my dad or whoever it may be. And instead, what I would encourage you to do is say, what aspect of them do you like? What aspect are you similar in that way? And so then you can turn to look at that person from that loving space, as opposed to that resentment, as opposed to trying to do everything in your power to avoid being like that person, because the more you do that, the more that you will.
Right. And I think it's easier said than done. I yesterday, and I'm going to put it out there, yesterday I told you that I didn't want to be like so bad. I love you, Ma, with all my heart. But there are some things about her that I don't I don't want to. I feel like I've
Every child has said this about their parents.
right. There's
okay?
certain things that you
know,
don't. Right.
let's admit it. Let's keep it real.
Right. So there's some things I want to be different. And I remember you out there is what she shared with me yesterday. And so last night, and it's funny how it kind of worked out because it wasn't forced, but I was writing in my journal. And I stopped to look at my hands. And it's funny because I'm not wearing nail polish, and I almost always wear nail polish, but my mom rarely polishes her nails. And I stopped to look at my hands, and I was like, wow, I have my mom's hands. And it's something that it's not that I've never noticed it before. I just never paid much attention to it. And because we were talking about, her earlier, I think, it was just fresh. And I started to write down all the things that my hands reminded me of, and all the things that she's done for me and how present she's been in my life. And so for me, that was a small step.
Yeah, of appreciating your mom, of acknowledging that there are aspects of you similar to your mom that I
love and that I absolutely embrace, and what what I've learned and what she's taught me. And I don't know. I think that was huge. But I feel like my heart's opened up a little bit, since doing that. So you don't have to completely forgive a person or embrace them, or not that I have to, whatever. But
we do want to forgive the person, right?
But
But more so for you,
right? But not all. It doesn't have to be all at once, right? Because that can be
a little overwhelming,
right?
And there is a process to doing those types of things, and it also can come in layers, right? So we've talked about a volunteer group of ours where we participate and we help people overcome some of these deeper wounds. And it's in layers. It's maybe the immediate thing that you're wanting to address is uncovered and released, and you feel this peace around. But there's always something more and more and more. It didn't happen overnight, right? And so, these things can take some time, and a lot of healing can take place, as well as a lot of that love being filled back up. And again, we determine that love comes from that spiritual and relationship connection that we have, with our Creator. And it's a beautiful thing, but I think it's also a continuing process.
Right.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So I have just a couple of other things that I wrote down that I've been thinking about. So they say that that it isn't always experience that drives somebody to be successful, because I think ultimately that is always been kind of my driving factor, is that, and we talked about it the last show with affirmations, but wanting to reach that point of success, when for all of us it varies, right? Mm-hmm. They say that experience or knowledge necessarily isn't what gets you to that point, but it's the hunger. Mm-hmm. And what is it that I or other people like me can do to like reignite that drive, that hunger? Because when you hit a slump, I feel like for me it's getting up to do whatever it is that I need to do to move forward. Mm-hmm. And that's really hard sometimes. So what can I do right now to like get going again?
Right.
Can I read something? Should I like go run? Should I, and that's, I don't know.
I think for you specifically, Rocio, I would probably say it's not doing anything. That's your issue. Is that
I always have to be doing something.
Yeah. You're trying to find it out there. And again, we tap back in. Right. And I do believe that our successes, and it depends on how you define success. What does success really mean to you? Right. And I've shared what my priorities are of success in the past, but it does come from experiences, and those experiences don't necessarily have to mean in the way that other people perceive them through, how many years you've been working, what, letters are behind your name, what title that you have, but it's through the experiences that you're sharing with other people in each day. Right. If you're not doing that, that's when we start to go in that slump and we start walking around like a zombie and we feel unfulfilled because we're not connecting, we're not sharing, we're not giving back. right? So we're just taking in, and we're not allowing that to pass through. And that's where I start to see people go into that funk. For some other people, it might mean to go out there and listen to a podcast, read a book, go, volunteer, get active and out in the community. Each person is slightly different. But again, it's coming back to that hunger, like you said. What is that hunger? What is that driving force? And again, for me, it's, okay, it's not about me. It's about the lives and the other people that are out there that we can make an impact, not just on them, but who they're impacting, and letting them see how they can shine and influence other people. And if you're looking at it from a place of status, if you're looking at it at a place of judgment, perfection, what are other people going to think, that's really probably what's creeping in. Because it doesn't matter if you were working on this or now you work on that. It's that mission should still be true to what it is, and regardless of what we do. Does that resonate?
A little.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's something that I'm definitely working through.
Right. What's the biggest, challenge that you're feeling right now around all of this, around the transition?
I don't know. I think I keep saying it over and over again, but it's the uncertainty, and money. I'm just gonna put it out there,
Mm-hmm. And the uncertainty around what? About what's going to happen next, where are you going to be? You can cry. It's okay. It's okay.
Cut.
Grab your boobs.
I'm an ugly crier. This is horrible.
Stop. Is it because, you put your heart into everything? You gave it your all.
Yeah.
And was that one of the first times that you've done it like that? Or have you done that before?
Oh, I've done it before, I think.
And what was different about this time?
I don't think there was anything that was different. I feel like I was disappointed again.
Mm-hmm.
It sucks, honestly. It sucks when you put your heart and all of your faith into something or someone, and then you're let down. And then you feel silly. Then I feel stupid, honestly. Then I feel stupid because I feel like that wall that I created, I've been working on knocking down, that was there for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and so,
getting really hot.
Take it off. All right. So when we put our heart and we put our soul into something, right? When we put it into people, when we put it into other things, we can only expect so much from other people, from other things. Right. And one of the things that I learned, and it, just took me so many years of just trials and tribulations, crying, disappointment, suicidal thoughts. And I realized that, I can't expect somebody to love me the way that I want them to love me. I can't expect this, product, this service, this other thing to give me back what I truly needed inside, which was that unconditional love, right? The everlasting love. And it's not to disregard, the feelings that you're experiencing right now.
Right.
And sometimes in our head, though, we can say, oh my gosh, this is it. It's over. We can't see what's coming next. And in reality, it hasn't completely come to a close yet.
No. It's just...
but it feels like it.
It's a roadblock. Again, it's that not knowing. And for somebody like me who always needs an answer, I need to know what is next on my list. I don't know, that... it's difficult because I feel like it's just a roadblock. It's not,
right.
It's this thing that we're talking about isn't something that I feel like maybe is like completely, out or is not going to happen, but it's just the possibility of it. It just becomes more and more real with every day that comes.
Right.
it sucks.
Yeah, it sucks right now, but I
Right.
think this is
But
where
ultimately, and I think, and I don't mean to cut you off, I'm sorry, but I think I've shared with you that the takeaway, whether this happens or doesn't happen, is huge because I've learned so many incredible things about myself in this process, and I know that they're going to serve me endlessly in the future. And so I'm very grateful for those things, but there I go crying again. I cry when I'm happy, I cry when I'm sad. But it's processing those things, I'm still processing. So
yeah. In the fact that you said, Rocio, that you need to know what's next, I think that's where the breakthrough is right here. Because, then we don't know what's next, but what do we see? Right? We have this beautiful clean slate.
And it's yeah.
Yeah. And then we also have a pen where you can actually start to write things down on there. Right? And then there's other things that start to appear that we don't plan for. And it's allowing ourselves to be vulnerable and know that we're going to be okay.
Right. And, and I honestly, not to take anything away, I've come a long way, I feel like, especially since we started working together, because I think, had the same situation happened last year before we started working together, I would have handled things so much differently. I would have been much more emotional. And when I say emotional, it's not crying. It would be probably a lot of anger and a lot more frustration.
You probably would have shut down and not seen any other opportunities that are out there. You would have been like, oh, that's not going to work, or I'm not going to trust this person now, or no, I'm not going to go here because what is that going to do? And you would have become very negative and jaded, right?
Right, definitely. And I feel like, once I process, when my feelings, that I know I'm gonna be fine, and I've been fine. I've really handled the situation quite well, but I do have my moments where I get into my head, and all these raw emotions start to show up for me. But I have to say, ultimately, I feel like I'm very proud of myself.
Yeah,
so.
And that's okay. It's okay to have these emotions.
Right.
We figure, okay, I've already been through this, and I'm not supposed to revert back to it. You know what? We do. We have our moments. It's how long are you going to stay stuck in it? That's the difference, is that before this would have probably set you back quite a bit. And now, look at. Right? You're not depressed and not showering. No, she smells good. I mean, whereas in the past, we probably would have done that, right? We would have just said, oh, forget it. And we would have given up. And then that plateau would have dipped down to even more darkness. And then we would have hit, that rock bottom, right?
Definitely.
So that's what we'd like to encourage you, is to keep going and to understand that you're not alone. You do have support, and we're here to support you. And we'd also like to give Rocio some support as well. And thank you for just being you and being real. That's what it's about. It's not these pretend smiles all the time, and these, we shed tears, right? And that's okay. So.
Yeah, well, thanks for making me cry.
I always do, don't I?
I think it's just your voice.
I think it's just that knowing that we create that safe space with each other, and to do it here is another thing. But I think we've gotten more comfortable in front of the camera, both of us. I mean, for crying out loud, I said my name in Spanish today.
I know.
That was a little shout out for a special one of our viewers. So thank you for your support, and we're here to support you as well. So many blessings to you.
Yeah.
And we wish you much success. And remember, success is how we define it. So
Bye, everyone. See you next week.
bye.